In the vast cotton fields of the southern United States, especially across the region known as the Black Belt stretching from South Carolina to Mississippi, a deep and painful history unfolded every day under an unforgiving sun. Cotton, often called white gold, became one of the most valuable commodities in the world by the mid-19th century. By 1860, it had generated enormous wealth for plantation owners and fueled global textile industries. Yet behind this prosperity lay an immense human cost built on forced labor, suffering, and systemic exploitation. The cotton economy was not simply an agricultural system. It was a vast structure of control, discipline, and extraction that depended entirely on enslaved African Americans. The wealth it created for a small elite stood in stark contrast to the conditions endured by those who produced it. Work in the cotton fields began long before sunrise. Enslaved people were forced to rise in darkness and reach the fields by the first light of dawn. One of the most well-known accounts comes from Solomon Northup, an African-American man who was kidnapped and enslaved for 12 years before regaining his freedom. He described how the day began with the first faint light of morning and ended only when darkness made work impossible. On many plantations, the routine was enforced with strict discipline. In Louisiana, overseers used bells, horns, or even gunshots to signal the beginning of work. On some plantations, a gun fired at 4 a.m. served as a terrifying wake-up call. It was not just a signal, but a psychological tool meant to enforce obedience and fear. The working hours stretched from sunrise to sunset, often extending even longer during harvest season. There was little distinction between seasons or weather conditions. The system demanded constant labor regardless of exhaustion, illness, or environmental hardship. Cotton picking required both speed and precision. Workers had to strip cotton fibers from thorny plants using both hands while avoiding sharp seed pods that often cut their skin. The work was repetitive, physically draining, and painful. By the end of each day, hands were bleeding and covered with small wounds. Formerly enslaved people later described the physical struggle involved in cotton harvesting. One woman recalled that every handful of cotton felt like a battle against the plant itself. Each movement left behind traces of injury, and over time, those injuries accumulated into chronic pain and lasting damage. Daily quotas were enforced strictly. In many plantations, enslaved workers were required to pick between 150 and 200 pounds of cotton per day. Failure to meet these expectations often resulted in punishment. This created a constant pressure where survival depended on endurance beyond normal human limits. The southern climate added another layer of suffering. Summers were extremely hot, with temperatures often exceeding 100 degrees Fahrenheit 38 degrees Celsius, combined with oppressive humidity. The air itself felt heavy, making physical exertion even more difficult. Heat stroke, dehydration, and exhaustion were common causes of death. Despite these dangers, work continued without interruption. Plantation records occasionally mention deaths from heat as routine losses, reflecting how normalized human suffering had become within the system. Water was carefully controlled. In some places, access to drinking water was deliberately restricted. Workers were forced to walk long distances under the sun to reach water barrels. In extreme cases, overseers poured water onto the ground in front of thirsty workers, using basic human need as a form of psychological control. Food provided to enslaved people was minimal and nutritionally inadequate. A typical ration included cornmeal, a small amount of salted pork, and occasionally vegetables. These portions were barely enough to sustain people performing intense physical labor. Historical accounts describe how better quality food was reserved for plantation owners and their families, while enslaved workers received leftovers. Chronic malnutrition weakened immune systems and made people more vulnerable to disease. Deficiencies in vitamins and nutrients led to conditions such as scurvy and pellagra. Children were especially affected, often showing signs of stunted growth and weakness from an early age. Living conditions in slave quarters were overcrowded and unsanitary. In some cases, up to 20 people were forced to share a single small room. Poor ventilation and lack of hygiene created ideal conditions for the spread of infectious diseases. Diseases such as malaria, yellow fever, tuberculosis, and dysentery were widespread. Medical care was either non-existent or inadequate. Plantation owners often calculated that replacing a dead worker was cheaper than treating a sick one. Enslaved individuals suffering from illness were frequently left untreated or isolated. Some plantation records show that outbreaks of disease were treated as logistical problems rather than human tragedies. Physical punishment was a central feature of the plantation system. The whip was the most common instrument of discipline. It was not only used to punish, but also to instill fear and maintain control. Punishments were often public, designed to intimidate others. In some plantations, every shortfall in productivity resulted in a fixed number of lashes. Violence was systematized and tied directly to output. Other forms of punishment included branding, mutilation, confinement in iron restraints, and forced humiliation. These methods were designed not only to cause pain, but to break the will of those enslaved. In addition to physical violence, psychological punishment was widely used. Families were separated through sale, children were taken from parents, and individuals were constantly threatened with unpredictable consequences. Fear was a constant presence. Enslaved people never knew when punishment might occur. Some plantations used random systems to select individuals for punishment, creating a sense of unpredictability and constant anxiety. Informant systems were also used to encourage distrust among enslaved people. Rewards were given to those who reported on others, weakening social bonds and increasing isolation. Even rest periods were fragile. Overseers monitored behavior closely, ensuring that no sense of autonomy or safety developed among workers. Medical practices on plantations were often brutal and unethical. Enslaved people were frequently subjected to experimental treatments without consent or pain relief. One of the most infamous figures associated with this history is James Marion Sims, who performed surgical experiments on enslaved women without anesthesia. These acts have since been widely condemned as violations of medical ethics. Medical neglect combined with forced labor created a situation where many injuries and illnesses became fatal simply due to lack of care. Despite overwhelming oppression, enslaved people constantly resisted in both small and large ways. Resistance included slowing down work, preserving cultural practices, maintaining family bonds, and escaping. Harriet Tubman became one of the most famous conductors of the Underground Railroad, helping dozens of enslaved people escape to freedom. Her actions demonstrated extraordinary courage in the face of extreme danger. Robert Smalls famously escaped slavery by commandeering a Confederate ship and delivering it to Union forces, securing freedom for himself and others. Others resisted through cultural survival, preserving African traditions, spiritual practices, and coded communication through songs and quilts that contained hidden messages about escape routes. Cotton production generated immense wealth. By 1860, Southern cotton exports were worth hundreds of millions of dollars annually, equivalent to billions in today's economy. This wealth powered industrial growth in both the United States and Europe. However, this prosperity was entirely dependent on enslaved labor. The system treated human beings as economic units, where productivity mattered more than life itself. Plantation records sometimes explicitly compared the cost of replacing enslaved workers with the cost of medical care, revealing the cold economic logic behind the system. One of the most devastating aspects of slavery was the destruction of family structures. Parents were sold away from children, spouses were separated, and families were permanently broken apart. This emotional violence was used deliberately as a tool of control. The constant threat of separation created deep psychological trauma that affected generations. Enslaved people were often forbidden from expressing grief openly, as emotional expression could lead to punishment. The system of slavery in the cotton fields was not only a system of forced labor, but a complete structure of human domination. It combined physical exploitation, psychological control, economic calculation, and cultural destruction. Yet within this system, human dignity never fully disappeared. Acts of resistance, survival, and solidarity continued throughout its existence. Figures like Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, and Solomon Northup documented these experiences, ensuring that the reality of slavery would not be forgotten. As Douglass wrote, slavery was not softened by kindness. It remained a condition no human being could truly endure willingly. The legacy of this system continues to shape historical memory and social understanding today. This history stands as a reminder of how far human systems can go when profit is placed above humanity, and why remembering it is essential for understanding justice, dignity, and freedom.